Hello everyone. I think we have more and more participants coming in slowly. However, as it's time, we'll start. Are we good to go, Dr. Moises? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Then I'll start as usual on time. Hello to everyone, and I'm Ruchira Banka. I welcome you all on behalf of Shimanli, a one-stop platform that supports teachers to deliver skills in class. I was just talking to Dr. Moises itself that life-ready skills are the tools that are, required for survival in this world of uncertainties. And these integrated into curriculum, would serve as building blocks for our future citizens. Shimanli provides holistic programs for students from grades 1 to 12 that prepare them to face the unseen. Students who may be good with academics, may be able to score very well, may sometimes be unable to manage through university lives. And one of the strong indicators in persistence for college education is a feeling of belonging to the university. The college experience can sometimes feel overwhelming, sometimes intimidating for students, especially for those who are studying abroad. This webinar will share insights on how college students can leverage the institutional resources to develop a deep sense of belonging that empowers them to unleash their talents, curiosity, and greatness while pursuing in a college education. Dr. Moises will offer the best practices he's acquired over the past 19 years as an academic advisor and enrollment management profession at large public universities in California and Illinois. Uh, a bit of introduction about him. Dr. Moises is a proven enrollment management professional that has successfully led teams in higher education to set and attain enrollment targets that diversify the student's existing student population. Over the past 8 years, he has fostered a high-touch, transparent, and affirming interactions between applicants and staff, which is an approach he's developed in the past 19 years of professional experience in higher education. In his current role, he leads a recruitment and outreach team of 8 staff for University of Illinois at Chicago, with over 22,000 plus undergraduate students, and makes it the second largest public institution in the state of Illinois. He's earned his PhD and Master's in Education from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and his dissertation was a case study of 16 Latinx community college students that successfully persisted at a Midwest institution. While at the University of California, Santa Barbara, he pursued degrees in sociology and law and society with a minor in education. He's also attained certificate in leadership enrollment management from the University of Southern California. We are looking forward to learning a hell lot of great educational strategies for student success, and how do we as educators support the students for their success. Thank you, Dr. Moises, for being a part. I know it's too early in the morning for you, and thanks for being a part. Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Banka. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here in the space with you all. I've been to India a couple of times, and the thing that really stood out to me is how warm and welcoming people are and how passionate they are about helping and serving others. And that really aligns with who I am and what I'm about. Before and thank you for that very generous introduction. I do want to share with you all what we're going to be speaking or discussing today. I'll share a little bit about my background, and then I'm going to dive into some really important topics when it comes to persistence and retention. And that is one, viewing higher education as a culture. I will also share some data. I'm big on data. I'm fascinated about information technology and how to use that information and technology to help others. And then I'll define sense of belonging. And then I'm going to highlight one key aspect that I think is so vital in student success, and that's having and applying a growth mindset. And then I'm going to jump into some of the best practices when it comes to leveraging campus resources to ensure that the students that you're working with are knowledgeable, are aware of the numerous resources that exist in higher education. And then we're going to jump into some scenarios, and I'm going to invite you all to share how you would advise and support students in those scenarios that I've created for us to discuss. And then lastly, I will offer some key takeaways that you all can can apply when interacting with your students. So with that, I'll go ahead and just, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because the wonderful introduction that Ms. Banca gave really covered everything that I've done over the past 19 years. So for me, one of the things that really has sparked and ignited my commitment, not only to domestic students, but to international students, was the opportunity that I had in spring 2012 to travel around the world. And that's actually how I met Christopher, a staff member with Shinli, and that's how we connected. I was a resident director for a voyage that went all around the world. So it was college students, lifelong learners, all on one ship. And we traveled to, I believe, 12 different places. And while in sea, students took classes. And then when we were stationed at the pier, they would go ahead and travel and explore that location. So one thing that I learned through that experience is how important it was to create a space where students could embrace the cognitive dissonance that emerges in life with support, with affirmation, with empathy, with a community that is centered on ensuring the success of students. And that has just ignited me on this path with working with diverse students, with international students. And I just cherish and really thrive in a space that I'm able to interact with people uh, that are different from me, that speak, that different, that have different cultures and traditions. And that's always been something that just has ignited my passion for higher education. And I want higher education to be truly reflective of not just society, but of the globe. So with that, I'm going to highlight this notion of higher education being a culture. So I'm pulling a lot of this from the work that Dr. Strayhorn has done when it comes to seeing higher education as a culture. And a culture is defined as a shared attitude or pattern of behaviors, characteristics of a particular social group or collective that distinguishes it from another. And culture can be transmitted, and this often is done through language, arts, rituals, and other acts of socialization, such as rites of passage, orientation, and purposeful ceremonies. So when we say higher education is a culture, there are traditions, there are customs, there are rules, there are unspoken rules that take place, right? That students have to navigate and students have to understand in order to be successful in that culture, right? So when we say add or drop deadline, does a student know that, right? When we say finals, when we say, oh, you got to have a lecture and a discussion, commencement, right? Convocation. These are all languages, that this is all traditions, these are all customs that if a student isn't knowledgeable about, they're going to struggle, right? They're going to struggle in acclimating to this culture of higher education. We have academic advisors, we have professors, we have adjuncts, we have graduate students that are teaching assistants, right? There's so many nuances. There's so much that students have to juggle and navigate when they go into college. And that's not even accounting for the cultural and linguistic differences that take place, right? It's not like a student comes in as an empty vessel. They bring all their knowledge, they bring their traditions, they bring their customs, and then they infuse that with college and as they interact with other college peers. So understanding that higher education isn't just a location, but it's an intricate culture that students have to navigate, have to be aware of, and have to be sensitive to as they're growing and developing as college students. So I think by framing and grounding this discussion as one that higher education is a culture really lends itself to some of the best practices that I'm going to share with you all. And before we continue, like I mentioned, I'm big on data. So I wanted to share some enrollment data for international students in the US. And you can find this data at the Institute of International Education. It's mostly focused on enrollment of international students in the US. And this chart is showing you that the total student enrollment from 1950 to 2022. And as you can see, between 1970, or I would say 1965, all the way to 2020 or 2019, we saw tremendous growth in international student enrollment. And of course, the pandemic hit, it impacted all of us. It created so much uncertainty and disruption, and that was seen in the enrollment of international students, where we saw a significant drop in international student enrollment in 2020. But since that period, we started to see a rebound in enrollment of international students in the US. And in 2022, there were over 1 million international students enrolled in US higher education institutions. And from last year to this year, it was 11.5 increase. And international students, even though we still haven't reached the raw numbers of pre-COVID enrollment of international students, their representation compared to the total US enrollment has gone up. And it's the highest it's been since the 1950s. So it's around 5.6% of all international students represent 5.6 of the total enrollment in US higher education. So how does that break down, right? Like, can we break that data down by new students, by undergrad and grad? And yes, we can. So if we look at, and this is very fascinating to me. So if you look at 2013 to 2014, undergraduate students were a little bit higher than grad students, but then we see that grad student enrollment started to be at a higher rate than undergrad students. And then if you look at 2019 to 2020, graduate student enrollment was higher than undergrad. And then, of course, the pandemic hit and we saw a sharp decline in that. But then after the pandemic, we saw a sharp increase in graduate student enrollment. Our undergrad levels are still not at the pre-COVID enrollment numbers. And I think there's several factors for that, right? Like safety, finance, student parents maybe not feeling comfortable sending their kids to the US to study. I think it's still going to be several years before we get to the pre-COVID enrollment of undergraduate students in the US. So something to be mindful of, something to be to think about as we interact with students and have conversations with their loved ones about pursuing an education abroad. So I talked to you about enrollment of undergrad, grad, international students, the impact that COVID has had, the steady increase of enrollment after COVID. Now I'm going to share with you some data points regarding persistence and retention. When I use persistence, I'm referring to the continuous enrollment of students in college. This accounts for students that might have transferred to another college or remained at that same college that they initially enrolled. Retention refers to the enrollment of students within their initial institution. So for example, if a student joined your University of Illinois Chicago for their first year and they continued their second year at the University of Illinois Chicago, then that's retention. If a student starts at UIC and then transfers to Colorado University, that's persistence. So they ended up transferring out and they're persisting by still remaining enrolled at an institution of higher education. So I just wanted to make sure that we're using the same terminology and the same definition, okay? So a couple of things. On the left, you're gonna see a chart that shows the overall persistence and retention of a entering cohort since 2012 to 2021. So in 2021, persistence rate for all students entering that year was 75%. So 75% of those that entered college remained at college. 67% of that cohort in 2021 um, started at the university and remained at the university. Now let's compare that to the right. So these two numbers or these two charts are showing you the persistence and retention rate for international students. So the persistence rate is 75%, which is good, right? It's really good because it mirrors the overall average persistence rate of students, regardless of residency status. The retention rate, which is again the continuous enrollment of students within that same institution, is 69%. It's actually slightly higher than the average in the US. So students are slightly more, international students are slightly more inclined to remaining at the university. So I wanted to share this because it highlights the importance of us providing students with resources. And it also gives you data on some of the areas that we need to continue to focus on, whether it's providing support for students that remain at that institution or supporting students that decided maybe it's not a best fit for them, right? And they're looking to explore other universities to transfer out. So then this leads me to my next point about sense of belonging. And I want to make sure that we're all using the same definition and that we're all on the same wavelength when it comes to sense of belonging. So sense of belonging is defined as being accepted, valued, included, and encouraged by others. And this can be teachers and peers in the academic classroom, and of feeling oneself to be an important part of life and activity of the class. In addition, students' sense of belonging has been identified as a potential lever to promote success, engagement, and well-being in college. And the key thing that I want us to focus on is for students that have a sense of belonging, they must feel like they can relate to others in the campus community. And in order for this to happen, there are three critical elements that take place. One, it's the interpersonal relationships that students have, not only with them with their peers, but with their advisors, with faculty, with staff, with the community. If they're seeking out volunteer leadership, research, whatever that might be, interpersonal relations, their ability to interact, the ability to have that emotional intelligence to connect with people is so critical and really solidifying their sense of belonging at that campus. And then the second component of having a strong sense of belonging is their discipline identity. Where are they hoping to accomplish? You know, what area are they seeking to develop their knowledge base and expertise? How is this shaping and informing the way that they're interacting with each other, with faculty, and with staff? Yes, we have to make sure that it's not fixed, that the students don't get fixated on that discipline identity, but it's a huge grounding element that students need to be aware of as they navigate college. And the last component, and I'm going to expand on this a bit more, is having this growth mindset. Do we see challenges as an indicator of who we are and what we think of? Or do we see roadblocks and challenges as an opportunity for us to learn from and develop the traits and the knowledge that we need to overcome those challenges? I often interact with students, and when they struggle in a subject matter, they say, "Oh, I'm just not really good at writing," or "I'm not a writer," or "Math isn't my strong suit." Rather than seeing that subject matter as an opportunity for one to continue to develop and nurture those interests, those abilities, and being adaptable. That's what growth mindset is. And that's so critical in the work that you all are doing as you teach students, as you guide them through some of the growing pains of learning a material or a content or a curriculum, right? It's not giving up, it's showing them that they do have the potential, but they just have to reach out and seek out resources and to praise the effort that they're doing to learn that content. So I did want to share a finding from the National Survey of Student Engagement. They do national surveys of students and they ask them about their sense of belonging. So if you look at the bottom bar graph, it shows that roughly of the respondents, their sense of belonging attribute was slightly lower than those that are non-international students. And I think this highlights the important work that we still have to do to create opportunities, to create a sense of belonging, not only for non-international students, but for international students. And I think um, this is our responsibility as higher education administrators to find creative ways to support students, especially international students, when they have an extraordinary amount of pressure. There are internationals that I've interacted with that their parents have taken out an extraordinary amount of loans to make sure that their child has an opportunity to learn abroad. So we have a commitment and an obligation to make sure that we're providing all the opportunities that international students have so they can thrive at our university. So I did mention that I want to highlight more about growth mindset. And growth mindset is viewing ability as a malleable quality rather than a fixed trait. And by viewing ability as adaptable, a student becomes more focused on the learning rather than proving their ability. And learning and growth become the primary objectives. So with a growth mindset, we embrace the challenge. We persist despite the setbacks and the roadblocks that we encounter. We see effort as a path to mastery. We learn from criticism. We feel lessons um, and inspiration come from the successes of others. Again, this isn't this is not easy, right? And even me as a professional, it's this is a challenge, right? And this is something that I have to continue to grow and develop as a parent, right? Like I don't know if some of you are parents, but as a parent, this is something that I have to continue to learn and see and support my kids in their process, right? So again, it's really developing the space, developing the language, and creating the space for students to see ability not as something genetic, not as something that you either can't or can do. And it's saying, you know what, I might not know it now, but with enough practice, with enough resources, with enough support, I could understand it. And with enough effort, I could understand it. So again, it's really important for us to have conversations with our students and encourage them to embrace the challenges, encourage them to see their ability as something that's growing and developing, and it's not something fixed and inflexible or elastic. It's just giving them the opportunity to continue to learn from every interaction that they have with one another. So again, I talked about three key things, right? Interpersonal skills, discipline identity, and mind shift. And when we have this growth mindset, we provide a space for students to apply effort, to seek out learn like educational opportunities, and to lean on one another for their successes. So in higher education, there's a plethora of agents or community members that want to ensure the success of students. So if you all take anything away from this conversation, make sure that you encourage students to identify the key members of their institution, of the college that they're enrolling. So a list of people that are very instrumental in their success: faculty, peers, academic advisors. In my next slide, I'm going to show you the different levels of a university, which can be very confusing for students. And that's why I wanted to share it with you all. But there's academic advisors at the college level, and there's academic advisors at the department level. So it could be a bit overwhelming for students, right? So again, it goes back to the higher education as a culture and making sure that they are aware of all the resources and the people that play a vital role in their success. We have career services, we have undergraduate research, we have study abroad opportunities, we have leadership opportunities as well. Housing is such a critical element in the experience of first year students, because if they have a really great relationship with their roommate, that opens so many doors, right? But what happens when there's disagreement or conflict? Because conflict will arise, right? And are students capable and able to navigate that conflict? We also have counseling and well-being. As we know, COVID really has um, magnified stress, anxiety, mental health challenges that students might be navigating. So understanding and seeking out those mental health and well-being resources are going to be vital for the success and the strong sense of belonging for students. We also have volunteering, experiential learning. All these different units create a experience that students can really soar and thrive and really unleash their greatness. So with that, I want to talk about the different levels of resources that exist within college. Again, this is if we are approaching this from the viewpoint that college is a culture, these are the different levels within the culture. Let's start off with the high level, the campus level. At the university level, this is where most of the resources exist for students. So if a student wants to do study abroad, leadership, volunteer, research, housing, sports and rec, health and wellness, counseling, financial aid, scholarships, disability resource center, honors college. This is all at the campus level. And it might change depending on the institution. This is the structure that we have at a large public university, Research One. So most of our resources and support exists at the campus level. But then a lot of the day-to-day, especially when it comes to the curriculum and the faculty, that takes place at the next level, which is at the college. And then if we drill down further at the department level. So when you look at the college level, there are academic advisors. There's also, depending on how big the college is, there are career support, tutoring. If a student falls on academic probation or they're dropped or whatever that might be, that happens at the college level rather than at the campus. In addition to that, we have honors programs at the college level. So for example, if a student is majoring in chemistry here at UIC, that would be within the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So that's the college. If a student is majoring in computer science or mechanical engineering, that would be the College of Engineering. So a lot of, when it comes to the major specific impact and resources that a student is seeking, that happens at the college level. Again, expanding that at the department level, we have faculty, we have tutoring, we have research opportunities. We also have faculty-led study abroad opportunities. funding can also be allocated at the department level. So if a student is majoring in mechanical engineering, that's a department, right? And then their college is a College of Engineering, and then their campus level is the University of Illinois Chicago. So again, I wanted to make sure to share with you some of the intricacies of institutions such as UIC. There's a lot. It could be overwhelming. It could create a lot of uncertainty. And the most important thing that I want to encourage you all is tell your students to find a person that welcomes them and can refer them to resources, because it's a lot, right? It's a lot of information, it's a lot of content, it's a lot of newness, and it's going to be a challenge regardless of residency status, regardless if it's a domestic or international student. It's a lot for a student to have to navigate on their own. And that's why it's important for us to communicate that they are they are not a failure. They are not less of if they're seeking out resources. It's actually a sign of courage. It's actually a sign of strength when they're seeking out support as they navigate the college experience. So with that, I did build in an interactive component, and I'm going to invite you all to reply. I'm going to pose a scenario, and then there's going to be different ways to respond to that scenario. I'm going to invite you all to either type, or if you're brave enough to unmute and share how would you approach that situation if you were in that scenario, or how you would advise your students if they were in that scenario. Okay. All right. So scenario one, this is for a student. A student's test results for Physics 101 has been returned, and they scored 61%. This is the first time the student has received a low grade in physics. How should they respond to that grade? A, they should start looking at other non-STEM majors. B, they embrace that shortcoming and automatically attribute low grade to their lack of ability. C, explore what went wrong, glean insights to help improve their performance on the next exam. They also decide to utilize tutoring services. D, they reach out to an academic advisor to drop the class. E, ignore the results and just continue as if nothing happened. How would you advise a student? Given the information that we talked about, growth mindset, interpersonal relations, and discipline identity. And if you want to unmute yourself, you're welcome to do so. I did see somebody type, so thank you so much for selecting C. Explore what went wrong and glean insights to help improve your performance on the next exam. We got another one for C. C, yeah. Yeah, right? Like C is the option that really speaks to the spirit of having a growth mindset. Yeah, most definitely. Great. Well, this one was pretty straightforward, right? Like, I think the next one, there isn't, and I made it intentionally, so there isn't like one right answer. There's multiple ways to approach it. So I'm really curious to see how you all will respond to the next scenario. And you're also welcome to provide a different response, right? And this is, like I mentioned, a critical element in a student success is sometimes beyond the classroom. It's often the relationships. It's often how they're adjusting to their roommates. to their peers, to the opportunities that exist, to some of the soft skills, right? Like time management, their ability to stay on top of their assignments. So for this scenario, it's about a roommate conflict. After a couple of weeks of living with your roommate, conflict starts to arise between the two of you. Your roommate begins to vape, that's smoking, that's electronic smoking, and leaves the door unlocked, which makes you feel unsafe. How would you respond to this situation? A, you demand to switch rooms. B, you reach out to your resident advisor and seek out feedback on how to address the situation. You ask your roommate to no longer smoke, and you explain that it makes you feel unsafe when door is left unlocked because you have valuables. D, you ignore roommate's behavior because you don't want to engage in an uncomfortable conversation. E, you decide to spend as little time as possible in your room.
I think C is the natural first step. If that doesn't work, then you can explore the other options.
Yeah, that's really good. So we have C's. Yeah. So we definitely want to encourage students that to try to have a conversation with their roommate initially and see how that goes. What about B? You're not asking your resident advisor for a solution, right? You're asking, maybe you've never experienced this, right? This is the first conflict that you've had, and you just don't know how to respond to it, right? So you need to talk to someone that can provide you guidance and resources and information, and maybe even model the type of the approach that you're going to take when addressing this issue of leaving the door unlocked and dealing with the smoking issue, right? So yeah, like there's several ways to approach it, and I wanted to highlight. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a really good point. Of maybe C is your first approach, and if that doesn't work, talking to the resident advisor. And again, this goes back to having conversations with students and letting them know that college is tough, right? And sometimes it's not the academics, it's the interpersonal relationships and the connections and the conflict that arise because of those interactions that you have with people. That's what makes it difficult, right? That's what makes it challenging, but they have the skills and the ability. And if they just show the effort and if they seek out resources, they could overcome and be successful and thrive and retain at that institution. So these are just two scenarios that might possibly happen for students. And I know, like, the roommate conflict, it always happens. Something always emerges. So it's just letting students know that that's part of life. When they go into the workforce, they're going to have conflict with their colleagues, right? And how do you express and work through those conflicts is so vital for their success. So I want to thank you all for entertaining these two scenarios and providing the way that you would guide and support students through these. So I just have one more slide, and then we'll go ahead and open it up to any questions that you might have. So how do we apply these insights into action, right? Especially when we know the importance of having a growth mindset, viewing higher education as a culture that needs to be learned, that there's vital players in that culture that students have to be aware of and seek out support so they can navigate that college experience. So first, encourage students to create an inner circle. That's huge. How can you make a large institution small? That might be by your discipline. It might be by your interest that you might have. Like if you're interested in cricket or badminton or tennis, or my personal favorite right now, pickleball. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it. So it might be based off the interest, the major. Maybe students want to volunteer or do leadership, that's how they start creating their inner circle of peers that can help them create a sense of belonging. Also encouraging students to find their passion, and sometimes that extends beyond their discipline, right? So creating a space where students feel comfortable and are encouraged to develop those passions are huge. Next, encourage students to be open to feedback and resources. And again, viewing seeking out resources as a strength rather than a weakness. Higher education is a culture which requires students to acclimate to their new culture and to apply the skills that they've learned with you all into practice. Seeking out resources, that's huge. Your major is not your only identity when it comes to college. Branch beyond your major and seek out things that provide you fulfillment, satisfaction, that feel your purpose and your mission in life. Next, interact with people that are different from you. You learn so much when you interact with people that are different from you, come from a different place in the world, maybe speak different languages, have different cultures and traditions. Your life gets enriched when you carve out a space for those types of interactions. Next, embrace the uncertainty. Right? Embrace the challenges. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult, but that's where the growth takes place, in those difficult moments, in those uncertainties, in those challenges, and that cognitive dissonance. That's where you learn more about yourself, and that's what allows you to really develop your sense of identity and what you're hoping to accomplish in life. And lastly, a growth mindset is a valuable approach to a successful college experience. It leads to students unleashing their greatness in their college journey. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I'll
And
check the
there's one
chat.
on the chat box which says, in your experience, how approachable are the hostel wardens or counselors?
Oh, really? So I'm assuming it's we call them resident assistants. So the resident assistants are very accessible. They actually live in the same floor of the students. Um, they are often they are compensated for their work, so they get free room and board. And their responsibility is to create a sense of community, to assist students um, with roommate conflicts that might emerge, um, provide programming for students to find a sense of belonging within their floor. So resident assistants are very much accessible for students um, that are uh, that that might have questions or challenges that might emerge. Yes, so the resident assistants are students themselves. There are full-time staff members that oversee the resident assistants and train resident assistants on conflict resolution, safety, and promoting a sense of community within their floor. These are really good questions.
Anything else, audience, that comes to your mind? This is the best time that we can actually get something from.
Yeah, so that's a terrific question, Nina. How do you deal with mental health and well-being at UIC? Do you have trained professionals? Yes. So we have full-time staff that provide short-term counseling for our students. I think we allot around 6 sessions for students. If they need long-term counseling, we are very much connected with um, community resources, and we refer students for those that need continuous and extended counseling sessions for them. But yes, we have that available. It's a big point of emphasis right now. I actually received training on um, mental health first aid, mental health aid. So we're creating a program where we're developing trainers to identify mental health issues with students and community members and referring them to professionals for support. So UIC is very much committed to providing mental health and counseling for our student population. But the big thing, right, is these resources exist, but often there's a stigma with pursuing and accessing and obtaining these resources that we're really striving to combat and demystify that it's not a weakness, but actually a strength for students to seek out these resources.
So just as a continuation, is that true for international students or the the resident students as well, this kind of thought process?
It's for all students,
All
regardless of
students.
residency status. Yeah. So there are fees that are included to support these efforts, and for international students that might not have that might need extended support, we do have a really strong connection with the community to really provide affordable counseling, especially if if a student requires extended period of time and it goes beyond just the six sessions that we offer.
Do we have any other questions, audience?
I had posted a question like directly to Dr. Moises.
Yeah, I'm reading it right now. So the question is, if a student has a conflict with someone powerful, like a graduate coordinator who decide their funding, where can they go for help? Yeah, that's a really good question. So so I'm assuming it's like the faculty advisor, right, that has the funding for that student. Usually the type of support the type of recourse that a student could take can be either at the college level or at the campus level. So there are graduate student support services in college that a student um, can express their grievances to receive support and ensure that there's no backlash if a student is voicing grievances regarding or the conflict that might be arising with their faculty advisor. And it might be good for a student to, again, build their inner circle beyond just their faculty advisor. Sometimes we lean heavily on that faculty advisor, not only for financial support, but for mentorship and guidance. And sometimes it's not one that is actually helping us, right? It might be toxic, it might be unwelcoming. So it's important for the student to identify other resources and other support systems that can help him or her be successful. And it's tough, right? At the grad level, it's completely different. And I've had students where we had to facilitate them moving faculty advisors because of this conflict and being unable to resolve it. So again, it's really important that the student builds those relationships, that they know who the department head is, who the dean of the college is, because that's, again, it goes back to the levels. You have department head, and then you have a dean of the college. So it's understanding those different levels and making sure that a student is able to access them, seek them out, ask questions, ask for support. And especially at UIC and other um, other public universities that I worked with, there are mechanisms in place to air out those grievances without them being detrimental for the students and the progress that they're making towards degree completions or funding, right? Like we don't want students to lose their funding, but we need to make sure that they're in a space that they're feel safe, that they feel supported, and that their financial support won't be detrimentally impact because they're seeking out support. again, it's the culture, right? There's so many different levels, and it's important for us to understand that there are safety nets at different levels for student success.
There's yet another question on the chat box. Who to approach if one is looking for learning support in a particular subject?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So most of the tutoring services that happen will fall under the department or at the college level, not at the campus level, but at the department or at the college level. There are tutoring and career services that are offered to support students. So, for example, if a student is struggling with chemistry, there are tutoring services that are offered through that chemistry department or in the college that the department is found that it's located in. So for us, it'd be the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. Maybe it's writing. Maybe a student is struggling with writing. There are writing workshops that exist that provide students with guidance on how to improve their writing, and that can happen at the department or at the college level. For us, all of that it's unpaid, so students can receive free tutoring supports. Again, this is just for UIC. I'm not speaking for all universities.
Okay, even I have a question here, Dr. Moises.
Yeah, of course.
I've been very closely related with the IB curriculum. I think that is picking up very well across the globe. So, do you think that there's a difference between students coming from different curricula in terms of their adaptation levels?
Oh, really good question. For us, it's important for students to have rigor, right? And IB is a very rigorous, really rigorous courses, right? So just seeing that a student has challenged themselves and taken on very rigorous coursework and performed well, that's often a really good sign. It's a positive indicator that they're going to be successful at our university. So we do want to encourage students to challenge themselves, and again, it goes back to this growth mindset, right? And often it's not the academics that are the result of students struggling. It's actually the emotional and the distance away from being without their loved ones. I think another common, and this goes beyond just like because I've answered the rigor coursework, and yes, we encourage students to challenge themselves. There might be cultural differences when it comes to understanding academic integrity and plagiarism. We saw a rise in cases in my previous institution where international students, where there's such a strong sense of collaboration, but there's no distinction between, okay, this is my work and this is your work. It was all together, right? And it was intended for students to present individual work rather than collective work. So it's just the cultural differences, right? Like, how can we have a conversation about academic integrity? Do we understand what academic integrity really is and the expectations that we have for students to provide their own original work rather than collective work that they're doing with their peers? So I think those are it's been interesting to support students in that effort, right? It's often not the rigor. It's often like a misalignment between what we define academic integrity and what the student has experienced or has done in the past or in their home country. So again, for us, it is our responsibility to be very clear with students about what falls under um, our academic integrity and what doesn't fall within our academic integrity policy. So I know it's a long-winded response, but it's often not the rigor because international students tend to be very strong in their discipline. They receive significant training. They're usually really great um, at um, the technical courses, but it's often the cultural differences, the approaches when it comes to group work, and making sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to um, um, presenting individual work.
Sure. Thank you. That's really helpful, to
Mhm.
build in a thought process that these are certain things that must definitely be emphasized at the school level for sure. Are there any other questions from any of you? Okay, so we'll move towards closing the session. And I would like to say, Dr. Moises, I really liked how you introduced higher education as a culture. That thought itself can mentally prepare students for picking up something new. The way you spoke about interpersonal relations, discipline, identity, and a growth mindset. So I also believe that growth mindset is something not only for students, however, we as teachers must also adopt to ensure that we are able to guide them in the right direction that suits the need of the hour. There are conflicts that do arise, there are difficult situations that will arise, and as Dr. Moises says, they must be able to embrace these uncertainties. So as teachers, how do we prepare them? And I truly believe, as what Shimanli also talks about, that it is life skills that we can support them with starting from school life itself. So just in case you're looking for any sort of support, then Shimanli is the answer for you. Let us pick up this growth mindset together for our learners and support them with life skills at a young age. Please do look at the programs offered by Shimanli and do connect with us. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. And thank you so much, Dr. Moises. I think this was really insightful, and I'm sure most of us being teachers here have been able to get in a lot of insight that we are going to transfer to our classrooms and help our students succeed in the university levels as well. They are our future citizens, and there's a lot on our shoulders. So let's all do it together. Thank you so much for this wonderful session today.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Banca. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to such a giving and supportive group. I'm a big fan of educators. My wife is an educator. She was a teacher for first to second grade. Now she's a faculty member, professor. Now she teaches future teachers. So this is a group that's really near and dear to me. And I'm hoping that you're able to pull at least one salient thing that we discussed today and apply that for your work. And if you do that, that's such a great honor, and that's a measure of success for me in my ability to communicate to you all what are some of the key things in unleashing the greatness of students, regardless of if they're domestic or international, as long as they're really pursuing their purpose and their life mission. So with that, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sure everybody has a good takeaway from the session. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day ahead. Thank you. Bye-bye.